You're listening to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. And of course, it only happens once every, I don't know how many years or like what the timetable. I can't even get it all out.
I see.
Well, I just know it's so funny because, I just remember the very first time when we reviewed Visions. And, but I do have to say that, the second season, it was funny because the second season, the only episode you truly hated, ironically, was the first one. And then it picked up, and then you're kind of like, okay, cool. So it looks like this year, I don't think that they're doing the all the international anime studios or whatever. That was a big thing that we had last year, was the fact that, you had some from Spain. I think Portugal was in there.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously there was Japan. I think there was a UK
India.
one, India. Yep, the India one. Like that one actually was probably one of my favorite ones. So you did have like a really good wide variety of ideas and takes on it from not just in an anime form, but from basically all around the world. So that I thought was cool. This year, although I haven't read in totality, it seems like it's all back to Japanese anime. But the fascinating thing is, including the episode we're reviewing today, there's a lot of sequels. If you actually go through the episode list, they are doing a lot of continuations and sequels to some of the stuff from the first season. I don't know too much if it's going to be from the last season or not, even though, we call it like seasons, but really it's volumes, right? Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3, where Visions is concerned. But either way, it's really interesting. This one, obviously, the Duel Payback is a sequel to, I believe, the very first episode of Season 1 or Volume 1, which was the Duel. And, it finds us in a little bit more of familiar territory, right? Like we're not having to learn a bunch of new things. It's almost like, oh yeah, we've lived with some of these characters before. And then David, of course, hello gentlemen, Star Wars Day. I'm on time. Yep. Daryl's favorite time of year is here, Visions. Yeah, I know. We were just saying that. So, again, with a lot of the stuff, I remember when I reviewed the original, The Duel, because I remember that was one where, you're just like, okay, I hate this. And I was like, okay, I liked The Duel, but I liked the animation of it a lot, and I thought that the character of Ronin was cool and all that, but it was kind of weird to me. This one, on the other hand, for me anyway, the Duel Payback, maybe it's because I've had 2 years of this or something, but this one hit me a little bit differently because I actually felt like I understood more of what was going on. It had a little bit more of a traditional vibe. And, it was one of those situations where there's a lot of action. Whereas I remember in the last one, he was just like walking around a town, interacting with people. You didn't really know where anything fell. You knew that what they were doing was they were taking the Star Wars universe and almost giving it that traditional samurai thing, which, of course, influenced George Lucas, right? The Kurosawa stuff and so on. But this time, there was a little bit of a, it had a Return of the Jedi vibe because the Ewoks were brought into it. And, of course, once again, it was, them using their strategy and their cunning against the Jedi. Now, the only thing that I'm not really 100% sure about is that main Jedi Grandmaster. It was it's almost like they made a robot out of the guy from the first episode. But that was the only thing that was a little unclear of. Everything else I found relatively straightforward. I've heard from other reviews that there's a lot of really good, strong episodes this season. Because again, this is unlike everything else. Basically, the entire season dropped at once. There's 9 episodes. All 9 of them are out. We were entertaining the idea of maybe just doing the whole thing in one big chunk, but I'm glad that we stayed away from that because there is a lot that you can dive into for this. So now with that, we'll go with what I'm sure is going to be your entertaining takeaways.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, we're back with Visions yet again. I'll say this: Ronin, this whole series of Ronin, this episode started off confusing to me as usual. I didn't know what was happening. I mean, eventually they did get to the point, and at least the story was actually good, in my opinion. Like I thought it was a compelling, interesting story what they were trying to tell. There were some twists and turns in there that were kind of like, okay, like you said, the whole Grandmaster robot thing. Like I didn't know if that was he talking to the Grandmaster or was he calling himself the Grandmaster? Like I didn't know. The whole Crusaders thing, like I guess they're supposed to be like the new Jedi Order or some weird version of or some alternate universe version of the Jedi Order. I don't know. Still, it seemed like he was more like the Knights of Ren because everybody else in the group didn't have lightsabers. Everybody else was just kind of like regular warriors and they were just, using blasters. You had some random guy who was like a bounty hunter who just who just had a jetpack and was just flying around doing stuff. But the story itself was compelling because you had Ronin and then you had this chick who apparently he had a run. Was that the same person from the Duel?
I think so.
Because I thought it was the 2 guys, not a woman. But
well, yeah.
Then again, I try to not remember season 1.
I know, and I thought about going back and watching the Duel and then watching this one, and I might go back and do that for the ones that I know are sequels because, it probably does. I mean, everybody remembers that Ronin was basically like a former Sith, and now he's like a Sith hunter, right? So he's almost like a Van Helsing character, basically. And, he's kind of like
a weird version of an Inquisitor.
Yeah. He's kind of an anti-hero type of deal. And I remember, because you're right, I mean, there was that one, I remember that was one of the things, even though in this, I actually thought that it was cool. That whole, like, almost lightsaber umbrella thing or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I remember in the first one, when we first saw it, I was like, what is this? But in this, I don't know why it didn't strike me as bad. And I think it's because you hit the nail on the head, is that the story was so compelling, once it got into it. Because that's another thing that I've always said about the series that I wish they would do, is that maybe at the beginning of the episode, give some sort of context. Because the biggest problem, I think, with even the really good episodes of this show is you have to really struggle sometimes. Not always. Like the one from India that you and I were talking about from the last season. That one was actually pretty
straightforward.
Yeah, it was straightforward, self-explanatory. It dropped you in, it gave you the context, it gave you the story elements that you needed in order to understand what was going on. But what they do with this is they're trying to give you this like little surreal, esoteric kind of a thing going. And the problem is that it drops you. There's a lot of symbolism. Visions is really big on symbolism.
Mm-hmm.
And just allegories and things of that nature. So I think that if they gave you a little bit more context about not even necessarily the world, just like, okay, this is what's going on, it wouldn't take you like half the episode to figure out what was up.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was the big criticism that we both had on the first episode of Volume 2. And that is, it was beautifully done. And the story wasn't bad, but it was just done in like these abstract scenes or whatever. Where you're like, okay, it's visually stunning, but I don't know what I'm watching.
Mm-hmm.
You're kind of like, I'm just watching a series of really beautiful images, but I don't really understand what I am supposed to gain from this.
Yeah, I mean, like there are some things, of course, that are left out. Like at least for me, um, like okay, I get the Ewoks live on this planet, so it's almost kind of like they were like on Endor. I did like the fact that they were like gambling inside of a AT-AT. That was hilarious. Um, but yeah, like this whole, it's like they had like this central command center, and this 3PO like character that was you know calling another droid Master So and So, and it was it was weird. Stuff like that was kind of weird to me. Um, but I mean, it's visions. It's supposed to be very, I won't say very, but somewhat abstract, in a way. So, and not, it doesn't go along with convention as it's supposed to with Star Wars. Um, Things I did like, um, I like the fact that he has been like collecting, instead of collecting lightsabers, he was collecting, the crystals from the blades. So I thought that was kind of cool. Um, Even the fact that like they had the whole back to springs basically, which was interesting and
Yeah,
kind
the
of
back
cool.
to hot spring was kind of a cool thing. And that's the thing about this show is every once in a while they'll come up with a really cool thing, like a cool
Hmm.
variation or something on, a tried and true Star Wars thing, right? Because we're used to back to tanks, not a back
Yeah,
to spring. And, it stands to reason that you might find something like this. So, yeah, that part
yeah.
was cool.
The fact that he had to form a truce with his, the other chick, just because they had a mutual enemy, and she's like, yeah, I'm gonna have to, okay, since we have a truce, I'm gonna need to borrow some things from you, just because in order for this to work. But I always just love one thing that was always funny to me is the ingenuity of the Ewoks. I always love that. This the fact that they can just take certain concepts, because when they tripped the guards, I was like, okay, I thought this was going to be one of those silly moments, but it really wasn't. It was actually a very good trick of, okay, we're going to trip these guys running across a bridge, and it's because these bridges have these slits in them that our spears can fit through. When they fall, we just start shanking them from underneath them. I thought that was kind of brutal and clever at the same time. I was like, wow, that's all right. I gotta give it to y'all on that one. That was creative. Um, but yeah, I mean, like the overall story of it is what kept me engaged. Once they got to the point, once I understood what was going on, that it allowed for me to forgive, this whole 1930s newspaper animation that they have. Um,
Well, the
I mean,
interesting
I
thing
get it
about
that
it,
it's
it's
tradition, but
it is
it's
kind
not
of
my
like
thing.
it's like this whole like I don't know, monochrome brushstroke thing, but it actually influenced some of the concept art for Ahsoka and even like Tales of the Empire or something like that. So I mean, it's caught on even further into what we would call the more canonized Star Wars universe because again, these stories are not canon. They're just
All right, it's an anthology.
yeah, it's an anthology of I mean, I wouldn't even say it's like what ifs, right? Because it very rarely does it deal with any characters we know. It's just here's some here's some things that are happening within the Star Wars universe.
Or it's
And
basically animation that's done with the Star Wars overtone,
yeah, I mean,
essentially.
it's pretty much an anime thing, right? Done with Star Wars overtone. However, you could do the full on anime type of approach and have it be more traditional Star Wars.
Yeah.
You know, you could, because the thing is these episodes, and I would love to know from a creative standpoint, like what sort of directive these guys were given from Lucasfilm, because it seems we're in the third volume right now, like a season 3, right? And it's the same thing. It's like it's all these like super abstract stories, and just they just drop you in the middle of these things, but you, because of the whole weird nature of them, it takes a little while to really, you know, get into it. And I get that part of that is, you know, typical of anime, but not always. You know, it really depends.
Yeah. Um, like I said, the anime, I mean, a lot of anime, this is probably one of the reasons why I never really got into it, like the traditional ones, like, you know, your Dragon Ball Z or Pokemon and, you know,
Yeah, I never got into those either.
Fist of the North Star and, you
That
know,
I
all
love.
that stuff.
Vampire
Yeah, I
Hunter
mean,
D, I love. Those I really do love. And particularly those two, Fist of the North Star and Vampire Hunter D, they do share something similar with Visions. But I think that it's a little bit easier to grab the story, though.
well, and I think the animation is what kind of throws me. It's just kind of, it's always kind of reminds me of those flip books in a way. Like it just doesn't, it doesn't really resonate with me. Like I prefer more the, you know, classic, you know, animation stuff, even from like the 80s, like the whole
Yeah, you're talking even in 2D animation.
2D anime. Yeah,
There's the
like
typical 2D animation that we all grew up with and know and all that.
yeah, like
Yeah.
I'm more with that if you were gonna do stuff, but like stuff from the 80s, if you will. Um, but yeah, I mean, I know this, you know, with the whole storytelling of it all, you know, they were trying to imply a lot of different things. Um, I did like the messaging when Ronin basically said, um, he's basically trying to, you know, inform the Grand Master, like, look, you can't, because he kept trying to tell him like about balance, and he was like, well, you can't have balance without light and dark, you know.
I know
So,
this almost goes into like a lot of these Force discussions that we've been having
right.
on some of our
And that,
shows lately, you know?
exactly. But that's kind of like what I think Star Wars is kind of moving to. And I think as far as in this season of Star Wars, you know, when we grew up, at least, you know, as we were growing up, you know, it's always been, you know, light side, dark side. But now, which I think is a cool thing for Star Wars, is that now I think they're trying to figure out, how do you get balance? Can you even blend the two? And if you can, like, how do you do that? You know, how do you really master both sides? Because on one side, the light side doesn't allow you to feel anything because they basically want you to cut your feelings and emotions off. However, the dark side, you know, lives off of your emotions. And so they're polar opposites. They're two extremes. And
Well, I mean, if you're talking about like the George Lucas version, see, that's the other problem too, is that now you have other people's, no pun intended, visions coming into the whole thing. Because if you kept the George Lucas version, it makes perfect sense and you never have to change it. And in fact, that's something Lucas even now keeps bringing up in interviews, because I'll ask him occasionally about it. He's like, look, these guys, they're trying to complicate this too much. The light side is the Force in its pure form, as it's supposed to exist. The dark side is almost like a cancer. It's like a corruption of the Force. And that's why dark side users end up getting consumed. Yes, it's a quicker and easier path, but it corrupts you. It's not the natural state of the Force. It's only after they started exploring all these different things that it's kind of like, oh, no, it's actually more like they're like two sides of the same coin or something, and they balance each other out. But that's something that Lucas never intended, ever. And so
well,
because of that, it's like, okay, well, if you're going to move in that direction and you want to, you know, maybe steer things that way because you could generate a lot more stories out of it, okay, fine, but they're gonna have to like come up with maybe like parameters, I guess would be the best way to put it.
Well, yeah, I think what I'm saying is, so, and maybe when I say light side and dark side, I really mean Jedi and Sith. So perhaps that's a better way of explaining it. Because those are ideologies as opposed to light side versus dark side, if that makes sense. Um, However, the Jedi's philosophy or ideology is of such where it doesn't really allow for attachments. And I think that does, and it's
Right. So you're talking about the way the Jedi
exactly because like
kind
when you're
of
talking about, and
make
that's
the
why as you
rules.
were making your point, I was about to argue with you, but I had to think about it. I was like, well, no, I think I worded it wrong by saying light side and dark side because those are just as you say, the rawness of it all. Like, and I think it's, I look at it as, pardon the expression, it's, raw cocaine versus crack rock. It's like, okay, the crack rock is stepped on, is contaminated a little bit because you're trying to stretch a little bit of, anyway.
Yeah, tell us.
I'm not trying to give you guys the recipe here. I'm just saying. um, it's
Well,
an
then you really have
inferior.
some Star Wars visions, right?
Oh yeah, exactly. I probably could come up with my own.
There you go. See,
Uh,
that's the secret.
I think these
If
people
you
are on
just
crack. That's
right,
what.
if you just watch this stuff on crack,
Hi.
it'll make perfect sense to you.
Exactly. That's. I'm the problem. I get it. But, yeah, when you look at it from that point of view, it's like okay, in its pure form, like it's not been stepped on. You just getting the raw cocaine. Yes, it is. But yes, when it does get stepped on, now you start getting to the dark side. That's when you start having, different things because you're mixing other things that aren't supposed to be with it. However, the light side or the Jedi side of things, they have their own philosophy, and I think that's the problem. I think that's the problem where Star Wars is facing. That's maybe what they need to look at is the philosophies of the Jedi need to change because I think to live that way is disingenuous to human life, and you can't really enjoy life in all of its ups and downs if you essentially cut out a major part of that.
Well, but I mean, I
And
don't think first of all, you have to remember that even though these are humanoid like characters, you can't earth the thing. I mean, you have to know that it exists in its own galaxy, and beyond that, the Jedi aren't really trying to live a normal. Their whole idea is like, okay, look, you get powerful enough in this, now you have a responsibility, and
well,
in
I'm
that
not.
responsibility, you're gonna have to give up some things. That's why a lot of times, like these like spies, although here I go earthing it now, but
Mm-hmm.
you get like these like really like special ops,
CIA.
all these guys, like these really
Yep.
high level guys, right? Like they tell you, like,
Mm-hmm.
look, man, you can't really be in a relationship because that could actually be used against you. That can now
Mm-hmm.
you're putting somebody in danger. People can have leverage and use it to make. It's like there's almost certain parameters that okay, if you choose this way of life, these you're gonna get some stuff, but you're gonna have to
Mm-hmm.
give up some stuff, and that's what basically the Jedi are saying. It's like, okay, look, you know,
True.
I
Well,
mean, it's gonna
that's what
be
I mean
kind
by.
of sweet, but there's some things that you're just gonna have to
Oh yeah.
not
Oh
do.
yeah. Well, I mean, but that's when you say Earth the thing though, it's like because I think Star Wars you can't have Star Wars without the reality of Earth, if that makes sense. Like you have to have the Earth elements because that's one reason why the lessons even make sense. It's because it's made for kids to learn, and I mean you're right. That is a lot, but see the unfortunate thing is the life is chosen for you. You didn't necessarily choose it. So that's the thing is that their relationship. So as they're going through, you know, um, a certain going down this Jedi path is like, okay, that was chosen for them. They didn't choose to be this way. Um,
Well, that kind of morphed too. Because the idea was you had to get the Jedi young, but this whole like, okay, we're gonna take them as like babies and all
mhm.
that. That came even really. That was more of an expanded universe thing that Disney more or less jumped on and took. It's like, I mean, I remember Lucas's original vision was basically like, they're still in the single digits of age, obviously, and the
Hmm.
prequels, show you that, right? I mean, when you see the younglings, they're all probably like 7, 8,
Hmm.
sometimes like 6.
But even in there, I mean, like, well, Anakin was what, maybe 8, 9 years
Anakin
old,
was
but then
supposed to be he was supposed to be 9 years old in Phantom
yeah, and
Menace.
then even Yoda said he was too old, and that was a Lucasfilm.
Well, his problem wasn't the age as much as it was like he had some issues with
True.
anger and fear, and it was really
Yeah.
more of a circumstantial kind of a thing than anything else. So David says, leave it to Daryl to find a way to bring in the gray. Of course, you love the realistic view of the light and dark side of the Force. So that's
Yeah.
that's that's David.
Of course it is. Because I mean, the thing is, I think that's what makes the story compelling. Because if we're talking about moving Star Wars past the Skywalker thing, if we're talking about, I mean, sure, you can keep it with the tried and true tropes that you've always used, and I'm not saying you can't still use those, but I think you could also introduce this whole notion of like, okay, what if you could balance both? Like, what type of, I can't even say Jedi, but what type of Force user would that be? Because we've seen the extremes. We've seen extreme left. We've seen the extreme right. It's almost like politics. All right, you've seen the extreme Democrat, extreme Republican. But what about the independents? What about the ones in the middle? Like, can they? What's their vision? How do they use the force? Are they truly in balance, or do they lack something? Like because they're in the middle, do they lack true conviction about what they believe? You could go into all that. And that's what I'm saying. Like, if you're going to move Star Wars into the next era, then I think you need to probably introduce another ripple in the thing that could
Only
make it interesting.
That's only if you really want to explore the Force that deeply. That was one of the other reasons why Lucas was always like, "Look, man, you got to keep this basic and macro, not micro. You don't have to explain everything." Now, of course, he then turns around and does a midi-chlorian thing, which, and then he starts to even go into this whole like nanites or whatever,
Exactly.
you know,
So,
where he
yeah.
was trying to even go further, which was really kind of an interesting choice. But I think honestly, it really just depends on how deep you want to go into the Jedi or Sith thing and how much you really want or have to explain it. Because again, it goes on like what you were saying before, where it's like the stories that you're going to tell. Are you going to tell general stories that feature the Jedi and the Sith or maybe some other Force users? Because you have that in some of the other, like the animated shows or whatever, and it
Hmm.
doesn't really require that much explanation to enjoy it. People get it, people understand it. And then you even going beyond that, you even have the stuff that focuses more on the war than the lore. And then you
Hmm.
really don't need to deal with it. So it really depends on, I think, where you're trying to go. But I do agree that you probably need to at least have some very loose parameters going
Sure. I mean, I think that's when you look
about
at,
how it all works, right?
yeah, I mean, because when we look at like comic books, right? When we look at our comic book heroes, you usually have people who stand on one side of the fence versus the other. You have, your Superman's, your Captain America's. I fight for truth, justice, and the American way, and I eat, oatmeal cookies, and I'm in bed by 9 o'clock every night. Then you also have like, okay, the villains who are your Jokers, your Thanos, the people who want to see the world burn. You got people who have, delusions of grandeur. You have all these people who have their own Lex Luthor, right? But then you have your anti-heroes though, like your Punisher. You have people like, I guess Batman can kind of somewhat be considered an anti-hero to some degree, even though he's more on the heroish side, technically by the default of his position. I mean,
Yeah, I
he's
mean,
a vigilante.
I see.
So
I can. It's true. I've seen him described as both, and I can see both sides of that. And he
exactly,
probably
right?
does walk the line.
Yeah, he toes that. But see, when you look at Star Wars, you kind of have the same thing. You got characters like Ahsoka, who was once a Jedi, who has now walked away from the Jedi Order, even though most of her actions are more positive minded, shall we say. And then you look at Maul, who was on the Sith side, even though he's walked away from that philosophy, he still uses the Force for more nefarious or darker purposes.
Hmm.
But then you also have Asajj Ventress, who's another character who was closer to the Sith side. Now she's kind of more, I think she would be more the true anti-hero
Yeah, 100%.
because, yeah, because she doesn't really, she just does what she thinks is right, more or less. And that her range of morality just wanes depending on the moment, where it's not really infused or imbued by something previous. So that's what I mean. It's just like when you have characters like that, that's what make them really interesting and compelling because you're like, okay, well, you never know what this person is going to do.
Well, and this is why I think that I and a lot of people have gravitated towards the Ronin character. And honestly, I really wish that they would put him in something a little bit more traditional and less surreal.
Hmm.
Because and I probably should read. I think there was like the novel or something. But I mean, he has a lot of potential as far as being a really compelling. I mean, he's already a compelling character, and you're kind of putting him in the middle of this like weird, bizarre half samurai, half like I could even handle an entire project, whether it's a series, movie, an animated series, whatever. Um, in this little weird samurai-ish world, because like one of the other things too is just like some of the really subtle things, like when you look at the stormtroopers, how they have those like little
Hmm.
mandible looking things, but in this it's a completely open face helmet though.
Oh yeah, I saw that. That was cool.
Yeah, I
That
mean
I
it
think that
just
was manufactured that way though.
it was, but I mean the thing that's is cool about it is the fact that what they do is they definitely take elements of the traditional samurai, ancient Japanese world, and then they combine
Hmm.
it with elements of Star Wars though. And they've created this really interesting mixture of the two that
Hmm.
works. I mean, the world actually works. If you were to create a more traditional, you know, like everybody can understand what's going on type of a story, but in this world, I mean, people I think would understand it because I don't think it's the world building. I don't think it's the characters. That's not the problem. The problem is just this very abstract nature in which they tell the story, even though in this episode, both of us basically came to the same conclusion of, okay, I was kind of confused at first, but then I understood because the other thing that this episode did that sometimes doesn't happen in Visions is you had somewhat of a linear storytelling thing going.
Hmm.
That's not usually the case. Again, it's usually a bunch of abstract images that are loosely tied together. But this, once it got going and you understood it, still abstract storytelling to be sure, but it did follow a linear path. And on top of that, it made sense. It was high in action. It actually, if you think about it, didn't have a whole lot of dialogue in this.
Hmm.
But the dialogue that it did have was meaningful and it
True.
moved the story and it wasn't just some, like nice sounding lines and you're like, I still don't okay, they're talking and I still don't understand what's going on. That kind of a thing.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
the duels were really good. I thought that they were spot on, and you basically there was just like a little bit of context and maybe a little bit of the characters. And again, maybe it's my fault because I didn't watch the Duel from Volume 1 before I watched this. I don't know. I don't remember understanding. I don't understand. I don't remember because I remember that was my biggest problem with the Duel. Like I love the world and I love the characters, but I didn't really get the point.
yeah. The story wasn't fleshed out and didn't have much context, which often happens, unfortunately, in Visions. Where,
Yes, but this one it
but this one
did.
did, and that's
Yeah.
made more. It made more sense when you start talking about, like, okay, who is Ronin? Oh, he's a Sith hunter. Okay, he's hunting this chick. She's like, okay, well, now there's this other group, the Crusaders, who's obsessed with you, Ronin. So what are you gonna do? Are you gonna put all your energy and try to fight me and kill me and get my kyber crystal, or are you gonna have to deal with the Crusaders? Well, he tried to just do what he came to do and not even bother with the Crusaders. That didn't work. So then now he and old girl are both, pretty much knocked unconscious, and then they have to both be revived, and saved by the Ewoks. And then now they have to kind of team up together. It's like, okay, well, we can't leave this planet without fighting these guys because they're blocking us. So what are we gonna do? Well, we've already kind of come up with a plan. Are you on board or not? Yeah, sure. Okay, for right now, we'll be at a truce, but it's not gonna last forever. Just understand, when this is all over, it's back on. All right, cool. Gives her a little kyber crystal. She makes a bunch of little lightsaber forks or whatever the heck that thing was on her hand. Um, and then they, set the traps with the Ewoks. And that's the other part I was like really confused about, is because where did the Ewoks and those other like Babu Frick like looking characters, like, what was their investment in all of this?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can think of is maybe they saw it as an attack on their village or whatever, because they were all happily gambling or whatever. Because I mean, at first, if you remember, it was Ronin's droid that was actually. I don't know if they thought it was cheating
Yeah.
or what was going on, but they were after it without question. And then
Hmm.
all of a sudden, they're becoming allies too with that Wookiee and
Yeah.
everything else. So I mean, that's the thing, is just like some of the story
That's
threads,
the abstract. Yeah.
some of the character relationships, like you could follow it and you can understand it, but
Loosely, but it's like
yeah,
loosely. It's like a fleeting little thing, like, oh yeah, by the way, you're just like, "Oh, okay." But yeah, it was different. It's interesting. I mean, like, the whole sheathing of the lightsaber thing is still cracks me up because it's completely useless. It makes no sense whatsoever. Unless you have that lightsaber drawn the whole time. I mean, having a sheath makes no sense to have. But I get it. They're trying to keep it with the whole samurai theme, so
yeah, they're just
I
trying to
let it go.
combine stuff. And I think what they're trying to do is they're allowing the artistic nature of all of this be the driving force versus maybe storytelling logic.
Yeah.
I think that that's really more what it's about. It's more about the feel and it's more about all of that, which is why I say that, all that aside, if you took the Ronin character and stuck him in a more traditional Star Wars project, I think he would be one of the coolest, most compelling characters that they've had in a while. And I I enjoy watching these, but every time I see one of these that features that character, I'm like, man, it would really be nice to see him in something, first of all, more substantial, and then secondly, something maybe more traditional.
Yeah. I will say though, that I did like some of the callbacks. Like you saw, um, like at the very beginning when he was dreaming and that battle went by really quick. It
Hmm.
almost kind of reminded me of the Obi-Wan and Darth Maul thing when they fought over the campfire.
Yeah.
How quick that battle ended. I like that. I like the callbacks to Of course, having the Ewoks and them playing like the little war tune on their little horns or whatever, dun, 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 like charge type thing. Thought that was, a nice callback.
Well, that's another
The
thing
song at the end they
right.
played, from Return of the Jedi.
Oh yeah. Yep.
So, little stuff like that was cool.
Well, here's the thing that's important about that though, because one of our biggest criticism, particularly with Volume 1, and especially it was one of the things that we said when we first watched the Duel, was unlike this one, when we were watching that, it was like, okay, other than maybe a droid here and there, this doesn't even feel like Star Wars to me. I don't even know what this is.
Right.
Whereas this one, it actually felt like, okay, it's very Star Warsy. Everything from the way that the duels were carried out to the ships. You had all the traditional sounds. You had a lot of the characters, even though they were modified a little bit for this world, it felt Star Wars-ish. There's a
Yeah,
lot of things that felt like it felt this one truly felt like I was in a variation of the Star Wars universe.
I agree.
Whereas the original one felt like I was watching maybe a traditional samurai type project with a few Star Wars elements dropped in. And that was a big difference. Okay, Ted has a comment, and then we'll get to David's. He says, Visions is a whole lot of, wouldn't it be cool if we did this?
Right.
And it is, but there is a lot that they could do, I think, with Visions to even strengthen that a little bit. Like, it's not the what if aspects of it. It's not, some of these things. Like, even some of the weirder stories. Again, it's going back to Volume 1, where they had that one kid that was trying to be, like, part of a rock band for Jabba's palace. Remember that one?
Oh yeah. Oh my God.
Now,
Yes.
that was without question one of the most bizarre storylines ever.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
but the thing is, I could hang with that if it's done giving us a little bit more context. And I'm not saying everything has to fall within the traditional Star Wars, um, you know, um, like all the parameters that you would expect to find in any Star Wars project. Because that's not the point of this. The point of this is it's a weirder thing. It is a little bit more abstract. It's a little bit different, right? But
Mhm.
I think that if they gave us even, and this is where I think Volume 2 was really strong. And again, I'm we're one episode into 9 episodes. And it's going to be interesting because again, one of the things that separates Volume 3 from Volume 2 is that there's a lot of sequels. There's about 3 or 4 different episodes of this that are direct continuations or sequels, primarily to stuff that happened in Volume 1. But I think that if they just gave us a little bit more framework of the story they're trying to tell, it'd be fine. Now, of course, they could turn around and say, well, that would destroy the point, though. But I don't necessarily think so. All right, so David actually has a couple of things. His first one, going back to the other one, but Daryl trying to make morality gray is what the Acolyte said it wanted to do, and it failed. The traditional trope works because it's more reflective of reality.
How so?
Well, I think it's important to note that the Acolyte failed, not because it was trying to do that, because if you actually look at particularly the Rebels animated series, they were really going in that direction with the gray.
Hmm.
I mean, you had the Bendu, you had
Yeah.
basically Kanan headed in that direction, Ezra was heading in that direction, Ahsoka already was in that direction.
Hmm.
So I think the problem with the Acolyte is the Acolyte was trying to do, they were trying to modernize in the wrong way. They weren't trying to further the Star Wars story and the lore. they were trying to shove a bunch of modern day social topics and use it basically as a platform. And really, there's only maybe a few characters in that were even remotely interesting or worth exploring. And the biggest problem with the Acolyte, and you and I both agreed with this, is the fact that I remember we said this on more than one review. We don't even know what we're supposed to be focused on.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it. Huge part of it.
You know,
Yeah,
the biggest part of it was we had no idea, like, which character, which story, what are we supposed to focus on?
Mm-hmm.
And I walked away. I mean, about the only character that I was like, I really want to see more of this person is probably Kamir.
Mm-hmm.
He was probably the only really interesting character that I'm like, you know what? I wouldn't mind seeing more of it. All right, so now David asks a question. He was like, how would you set up the context in your own Visions episode with the time limitations without losing quality? This is a good question, actually. Also, what style and animation would you use? Now, speaking for me,
But leave that question up there just so I can.
like,
Oh,
really. All right, you process. I'll actually answer it.
Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
So
You have longer
basically,
time to look at the question.
the context, not really. Actually, I don't. I should pre-screen these questions, but I don't. Pretty much all I would do is I would either, there's two ways that you can do it in the time allotted, because these are only like 20, 25-minute episodes. Which, by the way, uninterrupted is a sitcom length. You got to know that. A sitcom is 22 minutes. So when you see a 30-minute sitcom, it's 22 minutes.
Yeah, it's only 30 because it has commercials.
Right. It's 30 because of the commercials. But it's actually runtime of like 22 minutes. So you could actually fit a lot of context within like 25 minutes, even 15. And you could do it one of two ways. You could either do a whole, the tried and true, not necessarily opening crawl, but like the beginning text that just gives you a little bit of hey, this is where we are and this is what we're doing. Geez, all the movies do that. I mean, besides the opening crawl, even your stuff like I think Solo was one that actually gave like it didn't have a crawl, but it actually had like an opening like text. So you could do that. The other way you could do it honestly is just framing the story with context. And as far as the animation that I would use, I don't really have a problem with any of the animation that I've seen in any of the volumes of Visions, because I like all different kinds of animation and I can get into it. Now, I've got some of my favorites, obviously, but I mean, I don't like the animation doesn't necessarily take me out of anything. Stylistically, I can appreciate, what somebody's trying to do. For me, if I'm into the story, I don't care about it. But where the animation will get to me is if the story is lacking in some way or whatever, and then then maybe it's kind of like, okay, it's not even presented right. All right, so now are you fully
yes, I'm up to speed
versed
now.
in the question? All right, cool.
Yes. My context will probably be within the story. Like I think that with good dialogue, I think that's what makes it interesting. And then as far as my animation style, I will probably more or less lean towards the earlier stuff like Batman the animated series, the early like the 90s Spider-Man, or like the 90s X-Men, like that style of animation probably will be my favorite.
Well, you know what else would have been cool for Visions, and this is what I thought was going to take place, especially when they said it was an anime project. I would have gone with I always forget the guy's name, the one that did the Clone Wars shorts, those like 5-minute ones.
Oh yeah,
that everybody loved. They could have done that too.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't necessarily mind if they're telling different stories with different, because again, and I think you're right, it really should depend on the story. The story should probably dictate the animation style.
Mm-hmm.
But, that's really, even with your preferences for animation, I don't necessarily think that that's the biggest problem you've had with Visions. I think the problem you've had with Visions is just understanding what's going on, and
Yeah.
these like
The story.
really weird abstract storytelling where you're basically at the end of it going, I mean, and look, I've struggled too. Like there's been times, especially in volume 1, not so much in volume 2. Like volume 2, you and I, with the exception of like the first episode, we're kind of like, you know what? If this is Visions, we're on board with this.
Yeah, I can't. It's something that you taught me years ago. When I was learning video, is that people will forgive bad audio. I mean, people won't forgive they'll forgive bad video, but not bad audio.
Right.
And that's the kind of the way I look at this is that like I can forgive bad animation, but can't forgive bad story or bad like storytelling. So if you don't give me context, that's bad storytelling. And then on top of that, if you have crappy animation, like I'm really lost. Like, okay, I really don't care because I can't even process what you even want me to know, let alone see it. So yeah, I'm out.
Right. And that's why, again, because there's various animation styles. And I think this is important to note too. There is a difference between bad animation and just animation styles that a person particularly doesn't like.
Mm-hmm. Because like even with this one, like I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of this animation style, but once I understood the story, like you said, Eric, like I was able to like, all right, I was able to lean into it more
Right.
because I knew what was going on, as opposed to like the first time I saw it, I was just like, yeah, this is all stupid.
Yeah, like I don't understand this at all. And I mean that's
Mm-hmm.
the basic that's the problem, is that a lot of times the visions of storytelling is pretty abstract. Now again, I mean I am not like a rabid anime fan. I like it, and I've watched a number of things, and the stuff that I've watched I like a lot, even love. But I admit that I'm not necessarily a connoisseur. Whereas I think the people who are really more into, and this is something you brought up ever since volume 1. It's like, look, I guess, you know, you not really being an anime fan at all and me being like a casual one. It's like I think that we're going to almost be the Davids of
Mm-hmm.
Visions, much like he would be for some of these, because
Yeah,
it comes
exactly.
down to like, I think it was even in volume 1. Now in volume 2, again, both of us basically had a change of heart, and we were, everything was positive. We're like, okay, this is actually cool. We can get into it. But again, I think a lot of that is because it was other countries' take on anime. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't the traditional Japanese anime. And so I think because of these different takes on it, maybe, and again, it's a storytelling, it's the acting and everything, the voice acting. It all plays a part of it. But I think the biggest thing is, you had once said in the middle of volume 1's reviews, like, look, this wasn't made for us.
Mm-hmm.
We're reviewing this, but this project really wasn't made for fans like us.
Yeah.
And of course, you follow that up with, you followed that up with like, look, man, if it wasn't for the fact we were reviewing these
Reviewing,
things, I wouldn't even be
I was not
watching this.
watching it at all. Yeah, that's the thing. That's the same thing David said. Like David's not a Star Wars fan at all. I mean, he's probably grown to appreciate it a little bit more. Only reason why I got into it because I'm into it, and he was just like, okay, I want to hear you guys, talk about it. I know it's a pop culture thing, and he supports me, so he's just like, all right, I'm gonna just support this and see what happens. And I think in the process, he's having fun with it, more or less. But I think he's grown to has somewhat of an appreciation. Maybe not so much as us, but and that's fine. Like even for me, with a certain animation, like I've appreciated certain anime styles, like with volume 2 of Visions. I was appreciative of some of the animation styles, and I was like, okay, you know what, this isn't that bad. Like if I saw animation like this, I probably anime like this, I probably could watch stuff like this. But you never know until you get your feet wet.
Right. Well, and the other thing too, when you're talking about the whole anime style, I mean, there's so many different. And it's almost like saying, "Well, I'm into music." Well, you know, it's like
Yeah, what does
not
that
only
mean?
are there a bunch of different genres, but there's a bunch of different subgenres.
Hmm.
So, when you say
You
that,
can't
you
just
got to
say
be,
metal. You gotta be
yeah,
like,
you
okay,
got to be pretty specific. And I think that was one thing that I learned because when I started getting into anime, it was really like the early 90s. The early 90s was when I had a friend that exposed me to it. And we used to, I mean, he just went through this period where he was just consuming a ton of it. And of course,
I'm sorry that you had a friend who was exposing himself to you. That's got to be unfortunate.
oh, don't knock it till you try it.
Nah.
I was just say it's all's well that ends well, but
Hey, whatever your thing is, man. Hey,
anime is a weird gateway to some things. But
what's that? High and tie.
oh yeah, the hentai.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, no, Star Wars Visions.
Now they had stuff like that. Now we're talking. Yeah, Star
But I mean,
Wars cartoon.
the thing that's funny about it though is that I started watching because of this guy, like all these different kinds of things, and it's the same thing. I mean, there was stuff that I was like, okay, I really love this. I'm actually going to buy this. There was other stuff
Hmm.
where I'm like, okay, I
Yeah.
like it. I like it. I'm not gonna run out and buy it though. Remember, it's like the
Right.
'90s. We had to
It's
buy
cool.
everything, right?
Yep.
And then there was other stuff where I'm like, you know what? It's good, but it's just not for me. I'm not really into this. And then there was stuff that I didn't like. So even within the whole anime stuff, I mean, even now, like one of the things that I really love watching is they actually turned Ultraman into anime. I don't know if they got the fourth season out, but they had the third season out. I actually had to finish watching it, but it's really good. And I mean, it has like this really like 3D animation style actually.
Mm.
So it's even within the anime thing. It's like there's the stuff that people are like, okay, this is like classic anime. But even within that whole genre of projects, there's a ton of different styles, as we're seeing, by the way, in Visions. Because in both Volume 1 and I believe is going to prove in Volume 3, I'd have to check this, but I think it's all Japanese anime studios that are doing it. And you're
Mm.
going to see a variety of different styles. And, excuse me, it's all in the same wheelhouse. So, obviously, people are going to gravitate towards some styles over others. But for us, equally, I would say, storytelling is and the context of the storytelling is probably going to greatly influence our reviews of each of these episodes.
100% agree. 100% agree.
Now, the Duel, we actually had a little bit of, how do I want to put this? Kind of a little bit of a heads up. Because again, this is a continuation. We're familiar with the characters in the basic world. I think that helped out a lot too. I think the second one might be the ninth child or something, which is also a
I
continuation.
think that's a third.
That might be the third one. Yeah, like
Yeah.
then there's like the bounty hunter or something. I remember some of the titles, but there's at least like 3, maybe 4 that are actual continuations of previous episodes. So those will actually have somewhat of an advantage, maybe, in the fact that we're already somewhat familiar with the world and maybe a character or two. And then other stuff is going to be brand new to us. So it'll be an interesting journey for the next 9 weeks. Now, again, the only exception to that, unless we end up doing the 2 episodes, which is possible, because we try to hit these things every Sunday or Monday. But don't forget, the week of Thanksgiving, we actually do 2 episodes. We'll have our normal Sunday one, the week before. But then we do a special Thanksgiving Eve episode, which we still don't really know. We haven't really talked about. We haven't decided that yet, right?
Not yet.
Because it's like 3 weeks away, maybe, or something. I mean, it's coming up. It's coming up. I mean, it's amazing to think that Thanksgiving is right around the corner, but I mean, it is. But the next 8 weeks, we'll be ensconced in reviewing this Visions thing. So at least there's no mystery as to what we're doing.
All right.
Unless you guys like us are like, Visions.
Unless something breaking comes up.
Yeah, I mean, right. If something breaking comes up, it's not going to be like, well, but we've got episode 6, so.
Right, exactly.
I mean, the fact that, George Lucas bought back Lucasfilm, nope, not doing that, or whatever. Yeah. Yeah, no, we have to do that. So, again, I think, miraculously, we've actually gone our normal hour time talking about this episode. I didn't think we were going to do that. I remember there was a couple of times where I noticed our Visions episodes were always shorter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like I remember one was like 25 minutes. It's like, yep,
exactly.
Got nothing more to say, man. Sorry.
That's all I got.
But as usual, a lot of times especially when there's a lot to dig into, I mean, anytime you get us talking about all the characteristics of the Force, we're going to go off in some tangent.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up. Again, next week, stay tuned. You guys know we're going to be doing episode 2 of Visions. And we'll see if maybe things improve or not. Of course, again, unlike most of the Star Wars series, you guys can watch them all right now. I mean, they've all dropped. So we're going to review them one at a time, but they have all dropped. So if you guys, knock yourselves out. All right. So with that, I think that's going to do it for us. Hopefully you guys have a good week, and we will see you next time. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button, notification bell. You guys know the drill, especially with the way our schedule is. Although we've been doing pretty good with these Sunday nights lately.
Yeah. Let's not jinx it.
Yeah, let's not jinx it. All right. So with that, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.